is Inoue's Kuzushi. Inoue creates a big gap to attack with Oikomi Uchimata by fully extending both arms. His left arm, which controls his opponent's right arm, starts low and outstretched. As Inoue enters, he pulls Uki's arm towards him and draws upwards, whilst rotating his wrist clockwise. His right arm, which controls his opponent's head, takes a high lapel grip, draws upwards and to the left. This helps lift Uki's weight onto the balls of their feet and directly above Inoue's hips once the supporting leg is engaged. Here, without an Uki, Inoue shows the movement he makes with his forearm as he attacks. With an Uki, we can see that Inoue's elbow and the side of his forearm wedge underneath Uki's armpit. This helps first lift Uki's weight and then assists in rotating Uki forwards and around.
Hi, this is Shadi, and today we're going to be discussing details when it comes to unbalancing the Japanese way of doing Kuzushi. Sometimes you do all the footwork correctly, the hips, you turn, etc., but somehow they just seem like they're so far away or they just cannot be moved. Well, there's a little missing detail when it comes to the upper body connection that makes them go down with you. So clinching and Russian arms and Georgian arms are relatively easier than a sleeve and lapel because the close range is already created the moment you grip that particular grip. So sleeve and lapel will always be tricky because there's so many range of grappling that it becomes very complex. So the first detail or the first example that we're going to be looking at is Inoue Kose against Suzuki. Suzuki plus 100, Inoue is minus 100. So how did he topple him down? So the arm starts stretched out, brings him closer to him. The key is to keep that wrist very close to you. If the wrist is close to you, no matter how you pull, you're gonna bring them with you. And also the forearm acts as a wedge. Now if you want to flare it upwards, that's when you are going down and diving your head down, but anywhere else the forearm should act as a wedge while the wrist should always be close to you, and no matter how you pull, then they're gonna have to follow. It's all in the wrist. So here you see against Van der Geest, against Muradov, keeps him close, shoulder to shoulder, head to head, and as he pulls, look, he just sends him flying because of the close contact within the shoulders and the head. Now let's take a look at a more recent example with Joshiro Maruyama, and you're gonna see the same pattern repeating. The very famous Uchimata against Smagulov, same thing, keeps the wrist very close to him, and as he pulls and pushes on the head to point him down, like you saw Inoue doing in the studio, it's all in the wrist and keeping it close to you. If the arms are stretched out, you're gonna be incredibly far, but it's all in the wrist. Now another example is here against Vieru, same thing, shoulders and heads are touching, and thus when he pulls, Vieru will follow no matter what. So here you can see the forearm is wedged, the wrist is close to Maruyama, so as he pulls, Vieru follows inevitably. Even though he's much larger, it creates a beautiful Uchimata. This against Gambold is also a great angle to look at it. It starts off as Maruyama having his arm stretched, gets closer, the wrist becomes very close to Maruyama's chest, and the forearm acting as a wedge, and here pushes against the head as he is guiding the throw, as you saw Inoue Kose do in the Fighting Films studio. So a lot of the times, even when I was fighting Rokas, people said, Shadi, you're too far, Shadi, you're too far. It's because of the outstretched arm, but if I kept my wrist closer to me, the Kuzushi would have been much easier regardless of the size. So as you can see against Suzuki, the legs of them, they were very far, but since the shoulders and head were touching, when Inoue pulled, he brought him down with him and created one of the greatest Uchimatas in history of all Japan. So it's all in the wrist and keeping it close to you and using your forearm as a wedge and flaring it upwards once you are guiding the throw and then pushing down the head. That can also work for Haraigoshi. That can also work when you're doing Seoinage. You're keeping your forearm firm and your wrist close to you as you pull them into you, and then you rotate and guide down. So it's all in the forward throws. It's to keep that wrist close to you. I know it sounds very basic, but a lot of us still suffer from it, and it's also the reason why you don't see many great Uchimatas done from like the classical grips. You usually see it from Russian arms, because by default you're gonna keep them close to you, and there's no need to think of little details like the forearm wedge and the wrist being close and where it is. So if you have anything else to add, let me know down below. This was Shadi, and thank you for listening.